I'm Bakhtiar Sanova and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. European allies dispatch military reinforcements to Greenland amid unresolved US-Denmark talks. The United States announces the beginning of Phase 2 of the 20-point Gaza peace plan. And Iran warns of retaliation if Donald Trump strikes as the United States withdraws some personnel from bases. Thanks for joining us. The United States, Denmark and Greenland failed to resolve deep disagreements over Greenland's future after a key meeting held in Washington on Wednesday.
There are still fundamental differences between how Washington, Copenhagen and Nuuk see the political future of Greenland. It's after Denmark and Greenland's foreign ministers held talks with US Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the White House on Wednesday. They described the discussion as frank but constructive. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen said the sides agreed to form a joint working group to discuss security. He confirmed that Washington has not changed its mind.
We didn't manage to change the American position. It's clear that the president has this wish of conquering over Greenland. We made it very, very clear that this is not in the interest of the kingdom. There's a government in Greenland with support from 3/4 of the Greenlandic population. The premier made it very, very clear yesterday that Greenland, for the time being and for foreseeable future, will remain within the kingdom of Denmark.
Foreign Minister Vivian Motzfeldt said Greenland wants stronger cooperation with the United States. However, she made it clear that Greenland does not want to be owned by the US. President Donald Trump repeated on Wednesday that the United States needs Greenland for national security. He said something will work out, referring to Greenland's future.
And the problem is, there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it if Russia or China wants to occupy Greenland. But there's everything we can do. You found that out last week with Venezuela. There's everything we can do about things such as that. Not going to happen. We're not, I can't rely on Denmark being able to fend themselves off. They were talking about they put an extra dog, and they were serious about this. They put an extra dog sled there.
Denmark says it'll increase its military presence in and around Greenland. Defence Minister Troels Lund Poulsen said this would be done in close cooperation with allies. Sweden also joined the effort. Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said Swedish military officers were being sent to Greenland at Denmark's request as part of stronger Arctic defence coordination.
Several European countries announced that they are sending military personnel to Greenland. It's after security concerns in the Arctic following recent remarks by US President Donald Trump wanting control of the world's largest island. Here is more.
A Danish Royal Air Force plane landed at Nuuk Airport in Greenland late on Wednesday, with personnel in military fatigues seen disembarking. Denmark's defence ministry confirms it's begun increasing its military presence in and around the island. He says they'll be working closely with NATO allies. The build-up includes more ships, aircraft and troops, with plans to protect infrastructure, support local authorities, deploy fighter jets and conduct naval operations. Meanwhile, Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said Sweden has deployed military personnel to Greenland at Denmark's request. He said the move is linked to preparations for an operation known as Arctic Endurance. Norway is also contributing. Defence Minister Tore Sandvik said 2 officers are being sent to help plan future Allied cooperation. Germany announced it will join a multinational reconnaissance mission, deploying 13 soldiers to Nuuk on Thursday to assess possible military contributions. Meanwhile, France said it will deploy a small unit for a joint cold weather exercise with Denmark and other European partners. US President Donald Trump reiterated on Wednesday that the US needs Greenland and that Denmark cannot be relied upon to protect the island. He made the comment after talks between Denmark, Greenland and the United States failed to convince Trump to change his mind of wanting control of the island. Greenland is a self-governing territory of Denmark. Copenhagen controls defence and foreign policy, and the United States maintains a military base on the island.
Another immigration-related shooting has fueled chaos in Minneapolis. A Venezuelan man was shot on Wednesday by a U.S. immigration agent. It's the latest incident in the city this year during President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown.
A Venezuelan man in Minneapolis has been shot in the leg by an Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer on Wednesday night. The US Department of Homeland Security said the agent fired a defensive shot.
Back up.
They were both taken to hospital, according to officials.
Preliminary information indicates that there was a struggle with a federal agent in front of the resident. During the struggle, the federal agent discharged his weapon, striking one adult male. The adult male then retreated inside of the residence, where he remained inside and refused to come out. Eventually, federal agents made entry into the residence, and the individual was brought to an ambulance where he has been transported to the hospital.
Protesters and authorities clashed after the incident. Dozens of demonstrators shouted insults at federal agents, telling them to leave the city. Some fired fireworks at law enforcement. Federal agents used tear gas and flashbangs. 2 vehicles believed to be used by federal officers were also vandalised. At least 2 people were detained, according to officials. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey criticised ICE, but urged protesters to return home.
Let's be very clear. I've seen conduct from ICE that is disgusting and is intolerable. If it were your city, it would be unacceptable there too. And for anyone that is taking the bait tonight, stop. That is not helpful. Go home. We cannot counter Donald Trump's chaos with our own brand of chaos.
The incident happened exactly 1 week after an ICE officer fatally shot 37-year-old Renee Good, triggering ongoing protests against the presence of federal agents in the northern US city. The latest shooting took place about 4.5 miles north of where Good was killed. Around 3,000 ICE officers have been deployed to Minnesota in recent weeks. The Pentagon is now preparing to send military lawyers to Minneapolis to assist the government's case.
The U.S. State Department is suspending the processing of immigrant visas for citizens from 75 countries. It's part of Washington's intensifying immigration crackdown. The pause will begin next week, and the move will allow authorities to deny visas to applicants deemed likely to rely on public assistance. The suspension covers Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, as well as countries across Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. The United States says the Gaza ceasefire plan is entering its second phase. President Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff says the next stage will focus on disarming Hamas, rebuilding Gaza, and setting up a Palestinian administration on daily affairs. Witkoff says Hamas must comply as well as immediately return the final deceased hostage, warning of serious consequences if it does not. He and the White House have not provided details on how the transitional administration would be formed. The French government has survived a turbulent night in Parliament, defeating 2 no-confidence motions over the EU's trade deal with South America. While the opposition failed to unite in Paris, the episode has highlighted deep political divisions at home and the limits on France's influence in Brussels. Our correspondent Anita Sharma has more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where France's government survives 2 back-to-back no-confidence votes, accusing it of failing to stop the contentious EU-Mercosur trade deal. Despite France's opposition, EU countries approved the deal last week by a qualified majority, giving the green light to sign the agreement with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, reviving a dossier stalled for years. In Paris, both no-confidence motions fell well short of the 288 votes needed to bring down Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu's minority administration. Lawmakers first rejected a no-confidence motion followed by the hard-left party La France Insoumise, which secured 256 votes, leaving it 32 short of toppling the government. A second motion, tabled by Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally, then drew just 142 votes, confirming that mainstream parties were unwilling to unite with her party to censure the government. The Socialist Party and Conservative Les Républicains signaled they wouldn't back any censure tied to Mercosur, effectively guaranteeing the government's survival. French farmers' unions are worried the accord will unleash a flood of cheaper South American imports produced under looser environmental and health rules, undercutting domestic beef and other products and threatening thousands of livelihoods. In a blistering speech before the first vote, LFI's Mathilde Panot branded Lecornu's team as, quote, a government of vassals serving the rich, and said it was humiliating France before the European Commission and, quote, the U.S. empire. Lecornu shot back that opposition parties were acting like, quote, snipers lying in wait, shooting at the executive's back at a time when France needs to focus on international crises and a fraught 2026 budget debate. Surviving the double no-confidence votes last night keeps Lecornu in power, but the fact that despite strong French opposition, the Mercosur deal was approved on an EU level starkly exposes just how little weight France now carries in Brussels when it comes to defending its own red lines. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Ukraine has declared a state of emergency in its energy sector as Russian airstrikes continue to damage critical infrastructure, with Kiev among the worst affected areas. Around 6,000 residential buildings in the capital have no power or heating, and temperatures have fallen to around minus 20 degrees. President Volodymyr Zelensky says a 24-hour task force would be established to respond to the impact of the attacks. He says he has ordered more emergency support points to provide heat and electricity. Portugal is facing an uncertain outcome in its Sunday's presidential vote, with no clear favorite emerging among the top candidates. Recent polls show a tight race and suggest the contest is likely to go to a runoff for the first time in 40 years.
Portuguese voters will head to the polling stations on Sunday, knowing the presidential election will likely end up in a rare runoff, the first in 40 years. It comes as political fragmentation leaves the race wide open. A recent poll shows far-right candidate André Ventura, leader of the opposition party Chega, slightly ahead with 24% of voting intentions. He's closely followed by socialist Antonio José Seguro on 23%, while João Coutrinho de Figueiredo of the Liberal Initiative is close behind within the poll's 2.2% margin of error. Two other candidates, including Social Democratic Party-backed Luis Marques Mendes, each have 14%, keeping the contest among the top five extremely close. Smaller polls in recent days have shown similar tight margins, highlighting the uncertainty of the outcome.
The days ahead will be really challenging, and the result is unexpected. What is certainly expected is that we will have to go to a second round.
The Portuguese presidency, while largely ceremonial, carries important powers, including the ability to dissolve parliament and call snap elections. Despite Ventura's lead, his rejection rate of more than 60% suggests he would lose in a runoff against any of the other top contenders, leaving the final result uncertain.
China says it's willing to deepen cooperation with Canada while eliminating what Beijing calls interference. That's according to Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who met with his Canadian counterpart at a meeting today. Prime Minister Mark Carney will also meet President Xi Jinping for talks on strengthening relations. Chinese officials said the visit aims to boost dialogue and deepen cooperation. Carney is in the country for a 4-day visit, marking the first trip to China by a Canadian Prime Minister since 2017. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni arrived in Tokyo on Thursday for a 3-day official visit. She is scheduled to meet her Japanese counterpart Sanae Takaichi. The trip coincides with the 160th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Italy and Japan. Meloni will stay until Saturday before traveling to South Korea for a summit with President Lee Jae-myung. The death toll after a crane collapsed onto a train in Thailand on Wednesday has risen to 32 people. The incident left 66 injured, some of them seriously, according to local officials. The accident occurred about 230 kilometers northeast of Bangkok. According to the state railroad operator, 195 people were on board. Multiple rescue teams and heavy machines are on the scene as investigators work to identify the dead and injured. The Thai army has also deployed specialized units to assist in recovery operations. Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the Washington talks exposing divisions over Greenland's future. Stay tuned.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. Challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabala. Hi, Candy. One important note to Fierce. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for A News.
Welcome back to A News. A crucial meeting in Washington between U.S., Danish and Greenlandic officials has laid bare deep divisions over the future of Greenland. Despite what Denmark called frank but constructive talks, Copenhagen says there is a fundamental disagreement with Washington after President Donald Trump once again insisted the United States needs to acquire the resource-rich Arctic island for national security. While no breakthrough was reached, all sides agreed to establish a higher-level working group, raising fresh questions about sovereignty, security and great power competition in the Arctic. To unpack the implications of this standoff and what it means for NATO, Arctic security and transatlantic relations, I'm joined now by Enrique Cosero, political analyst speaking to us from Madrid, Spain. Mr. Cosero, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much.
So, Mr. Cosero, how significant is Denmark's statement that there is a fundamental disagreement with the United States, and does this mark a new low in relations?
I think the situation of the relations are so much tense, considered otherwise. There is some ebbs and some lows. It's a question that we have to see with time. Donald Trump has made as point really clearly that Greenland is a very place in the world for the United States. It has been revealed to us not only for commercial purposes and not only for controlling the commercial routes, but for establishing some sort of deployment for anti-missiles shield, which makes the things more critical than we thought that they were 2 weeks ago, for instance. I don't think there is a position. I mean, it's tension, lows or highs, being optimistic. I mean, we're in a new. I mean, we are in a new some sort of politic to 4.0, if we want to be so modern and such. But now we have to do what's happening, because I don't think that right now the most important thing here is how we perceive the situation, but how the situation is going to evolve.
Mr. Kraseva, how do you assess Greenland's role here, given its clear opposition to a takeover, but openness to deeper U.S. cooperation?
To try to find a compromise. The meaning of that is that if you want to, the evil in that is that if you want to reach a compromise, if you want to reach middle ground, and the other part wants the whole bed, wants the whole table, it's going to be tough to find that compromise. And if that middle ground is confronting a guy who wants everything, your middle ground is going to be just positioning towards or next to the first guy's position. So the money is on the table. What can I say? Even Donald Trump has made that offer for the territory, and Greenlanders don't want it because they prefer to be part of Denmark than part of the United States. I think they get a point, because all the social policy and all the social resources that Denmark provides to their citizens are quite different than the Americans, and for some sort, as I said, for some sort of this situation, the middle ground is Denmark is trying to find the middle ground, but Trump wants all. So let's gonna see if Denmark just puts itself on the other side of the board and trying to keep the integrity of Greenland, or there is a commitment, some sort. I don't know, cede the part of the land, or being free to establish army bases, or let's see. There are a lot of intermediate solutions, and I think it's not going to be the end of this.
So does the creation of a higher level working group signal a path toward compromise, or simply buy time amid rising tensions?
We have to consider probably both. Probably they're buying time, just keeping the talks alive. We have to see what we have to be very attentive for whatever J.D. Vance and the classical conservatism in the United States, the classical republicanism in the United States have to say, because it's not weird for us. It's not a secret that J.D. Vance and the classical GOP guys are considering that having access or trying to get into many different places at the same time is not a Republican way to do the things. So probably Donald Trump is going to have his own inside pressure. On the other side, if we want to be cynical about this, I don't believe that Donald Trump is going to accept too much pressure. And if someone gets on the way of Donald Trump, we know for sure how Donald Trump treats that kind of attitude. But some sort, these talks keep the situation alive. So probably it's a little bit of both, right? It's a little bit of gaining time in order to reach a better agreement. It's trying to measure the other guy and try to see where that compromise can get a reach. It's not going to be easy, because we have to start in the consideration that they're supposed to be allies. Denmark's supposed to be an ally of the United States, and the European Union is supposed to be an ally of the United States. So the scenario is quite different. whatever we've been seeing during the last years.
So could this standoff encourage Greenland to seek a clearer path toward full independence from Denmark?
I don't think it's a very good moment for Greenland to reach independency from Denmark. It's an aspiration, a long-term aspiration. They've been dealing with that aspiration for many years now. But trying to make Denmark accept the independency of Greenland is going to put the same Greenland in a very weak position, a very, very weak position. And the situation, I mean, the negotiation capability of Greenland in that moment is going to be reduced a lot, because right now Greenland is part of the European Union. If Greenland reaches the independency, it's not going to be anymore. And if he wants to belong to the European Union, all the process has to be started, and all the process has to be launched from the very beginning, from scratch. So the independency of Greenland only calls for weakness.
Mm-hmm. Enrique Casero, thank you very much for joining us and for your insights into this increasingly sensitive geopolitical issue. We appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
After the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. The White House says it's closely watching developments in Iran after President Donald Trump signaled that the violence linked to the unrest may be easing. His comments come amid conflicting accounts from inside the country and an ongoing communications blackout.
Killings linked to Iran's crackdown on nationwide protests are subsiding, and that there are currently no plans for large-scale executions. Speaking on Fox News on Wednesday, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said there is no plan by Iran to hang people. He said hanging is out of the question. He also disputed reports of a high death toll of protesters.
There were terrorist cells. They came in. They used Daesh-style terrorist, operations. They got police officers, burned them alive. They beheaded them, and they started shooting at police officers and also to the people. So as a result, for 3 days, we had, in fact, fighting against terrorists and not with the protesters. It was completely a different story. The reason I have to explain, and this is important, why they started to shoot at people, for one reason, they wanted to increase the number of deaths. Why? Because President Trump has said that if there are killings, he would intervene. And they wanted to drag him into this conflict. And that was exactly an Israeli plot.
US President Donald Trump said he had received assurances from what he described as very important sources inside Iran that the killings had stopped. Asked whether that meant US action was now off the table, Trump said Washington would continue to monitor developments.
There's no plan for executions or an execution or executions. So I've been told that a good authority. We'll find out about it. I'm sure if it happens, we'll all be very upset, including you will be very upset, but that's just gotten to me, some information that the killing has stopped, that the executions have stopped. They're not going to have an execution, which a lot of people were talking about for the last couple of days. Today was going to be the day of execution.
Meanwhile, Iranians crossing into neighboring Turkey said protests in their region appeared to have eased, but many said they were unaware of events elsewhere due to an internet blackout.
Things were fine, brother. We, as Iranian Azerbaijanis, didn't have any fighting, arguing among us. There was some protest for a few days among the Persians.
Residents also described a return to calm in their hometowns.
In Iran, there were none protests in our city. No, there were none. They happened in the big cities. There were some complaints related to the high cost of living. They have decreased.
Meanwhile, Iran temporarily closed its airspace late on Wednesday, forcing airlines to cancel or reroute flights amid concerns over possible military action. The United States has also begun withdrawing some personnel from bases in the Middle East, after Tehran warned neighboring countries it would strike American targets if Washington intervenes.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that Iranian opposition figure Reza Pahlavi, the son of Iran's last Shah, seems very nice, but expressed uncertainty over whether Pahlavi would be able to muster support within Iran to eventually take over. Trump has stopped short of backing Iran's exiled royal heir, despite repeatedly threatening to intervene over the deadly crackdown on protests against clerical rule. His remarks went further than last week when he said he had no plans to meet Reza Pahlavi and highlighted Washington's uncertainty over Iran's fractured opposition. In comments to Reuters, Trump questioned whether Pahlavi would be accepted inside the country, signaling caution about endorsing an alternative leadership figure. He said Iran's leadership could still fall as protests continue, but stressed the outcome remains unpredictable. Iran has warned it will respond firmly to any foreign interference as tensions rise following deadly protests and U.S. threats of military action. Diplomatic calls across the region, reports of U.S. base evacuations and sharp accusations against Israel point to growing fears of a wider conflict. Turaj Shirelilo has more.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has vowed Tehran's response to any foreign meddling in its internal affairs after U.S. President Donald Trump's threat of military action in the wake of violent protests in Iran. According to the Foreign Ministry website, he made this statement in a telephone contact with UAE Foreign Minister Abdullah bin Zayed, during which he said the U.S.-Israeli plot to misuse the protests in Iran has failed. The ministry added Iran's top diplomat also held a telephone conversation with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan on Wednesday, discussing with him the latest regional developments. Meantime, Secretary of Supreme National Security Council Ali Larijani held separate phone calls with Prime Minister of Qatar and Iraqi security chief on Wednesday. Turkey, Qatar, and Iraq are hosting U.S. military bases as there are reports that U.S. Army is evacuating Al Udeid base near Qatar's capital Doha and Ain al-Assad base in Iraq, expecting Iran's retaliation. In a post on X, Araghchi blamed Israel for loudly boasting that it has armed the protesters in Iran with weapons, which he said was the reason behind hundreds of people killed in the protests. He said that Tel Aviv wants to drag Washington into fighting wars on its behalf, adding that this time Israel is remarkably vocalizing its secret intentions about Iran's developments. His remarks were made amid reports of differences among U.S. officials on whether to resume diplomacy or to invade Iran again, as well as opposition of the regional countries to Trump's repeating the attacks of last June. Foreign Ministry has lashed out at U.S. administration's announcement of additional tariffs on Iran's trade partners, branding it a crime against humanity. It also summoned UK ambassador to Tehran twice after protesters attacked Iran's embassy in London for the second time this week. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, A News.
A new forecast by the World Bank points to a slowdown in Kazakhstan's economic growth in 2026. While the country continues to rely on external trade and energy revenues, the bank highlights a combination of economic risks, including inflation, weaker domestic demand, and shifting export conditions. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina reports from Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan's economy is set to slow down, according to a new forecast by the World Bank, which points to rising external risks for the largest economy in Central Asia. The bank estimates Kazakhstan's GDP growth will decline to 4.5%. Key factors include stabilizing oil production levels and lower global prices for raw materials. These developments directly affect export revenues and government income, making the economy more vulnerable to external shocks. The oil factor is already having an impact beyond Kazakhstan's borders. According to Bloomberg, lower volumes of CPC blend from Kazakhstan, combined with supply disruptions from Libya and several fields in the North Sea, have pushed prices higher across northern and Mediterranean European markets. At the start of 2026, risks to the global oil market were primarily associated with instability in Iran and Venezuela. And in practice, however, the most immediate impact has come from Kazakhstan. The key issue lies at the terminal of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium. At present, only one of its 3 offshore loading units is operational. One was damaged during a drone attack in November, while another is undergoing scheduled maintenance. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed in Abu Dhabi to review bilateral relations. The meeting focused on the current state of ties and opportunities to deepen cooperation between the two countries. During the visit, Fidan also held separate talks with his Emirati counterpart. The officials discussed ways to expand joint work and strengthen cooperation across various fields. Georgia is increasingly turning to the east to strengthen its economic partnerships. In Abu Dhabi, Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze held high-level talks with the leadership of the United Arab Emirates, highlighting major investments and signaling Tbilisi's growing focus on cooperation with Gulf states. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili reports.
Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze, who is in Abu Dhabi to participate in Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, met with the United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan as part of ongoing efforts to deepen bilateral relations between the two countries. According to the Georgian government, the meeting focused on the positive dynamics of the Georgia and the United Arab Emirates relations, which have intensified in recent years due to close political dialogue and expanding economic cooperation. The Georgian side emphasized that last year's official visit of the UAE president to Georgia played an important role in giving new momentum to the partnership. A key focus of the talks was investment cooperation. Georgian officials highlighted the $6.6 billion investment by Eagle Hills, calling it a historic project that reflects the UAE's long-term confidence in Georgia's economy. The investment is expected to support urban development, tourism, and related sectors, while also sending a strong signal to other potential investors from the Gulf region. The meeting also addressed infrastructure and logistics cooperation, particularly the Tbilisi Dry Port project, which is being implemented with the UAE investment. The project is seen as strategically important for Georgia's ambition to become a regional transit hub, strengthening connectivity between Europe and Asia and supporting the development of the Middle Corridor project. The Georgian delegation in Abu Dhabi included senior ministers responsible for foreign affairs, economy, environment, justice, and government administration, underlining the high priority Georgia places on relations with the UAE and on expanding economic ties with the Gulf states. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss rising Iran-US tensions and the growing risk of regional escalation. See you shortly.
Azerbaijan is strategically located between Asia and Europe, positioned at the crossroads of global trade routes. Drug trafficking remains one of the most dangerous risks associated with such misuse.
Drug abuse is a global challenge.
Mostly seized drugs was heroin and marijuana. Most trafficking operations originate from markets in Afghanistan and intended for Western European countries.
Border control increasingly relies on risk profiling and intelligence, including cargo manifests and customs declarations.
It negatively affects public safety and public health. It affects people from all social backgrounds and causes serious harm.
Welcome back to A News. Tensions are rising sharply around Iran, with the United States issuing new security alerts, repositioning military assets and warning civilians to stay away from bases across the Middle East, raising fears that unrest inside Iran could spill into a wider regional confrontation. To unpack the rapidly evolving situation, the risks of escalation, and what it means for regional security, I'm joined now by Fuad Karimli, a political analyst speaking to us from Baku, Azerbaijan. Mr. Karimli, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Fuad, how serious is the current security alert issued by the United States, and what does it signal about Washington's assessment of the threat level?
Well, I would say that it's a quite serious situation. We have to take into consideration that the protests have been ongoing for a while now, and that the U.S. right now is the Trump administration is making statements about getting involved in the protests, somehow saying that they're supportive of the protests, and it also shows that the U.S. is kind of wary of the situation in terms of the effect it can have on the U.S. citizens in the region. I think they want to have more of a precautious approach rather than take any chances of having harm done to their civilians. So yes, I would say that it's quite serious alert, but we could also take into consideration that similar alerts have been taking place before in other regional countries when tensions were arisen. But combining that with the rhetoric of the Trump administration is the key here. I think Trump is kind of weighing in on the situation, trying to push it towards an outcome that would benefit the U.S. Rather than just calming down the situation. So it's something that needs to be taken into consideration highly.
So President Trump says the killings in Iran are stopping. How credible is this claim given the lack of independent verification?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the lack of independent verification is the big issue here. And second of all, the connectivity from within. There's a blockade of internet. Yes, there have been some cases of usage of Starlink by some civilians in Iran, but I think looking at the different sides, so there were some human rights organizations that said that the deaths were up to around 12,000, but then some other reports stated it was around 2,000. I think, both of them are already significant numbers in itself, but we see that the Trump administration really tries to weigh in on the deaths and the violence of the protests in terms of having a precedent for intervening, because an argument can be made by, which is being made by the local government, that this is an internal issue and that external actors should not get involved. But the Trump administration is kind of trying to push the rhetoric that it's a significant development, it harms the civilians, and it's a civilian issue, humanitarian issue.
Fuad, what message does the partial withdrawal of U.S. personnel from Al Udeid Air Base send to Iran and to U.S. allies?
I think, first of all, the U.S. is trying to have a really careful approach, because the Trump administration has stated that they're not shying away from intervening. As a result, the Iranian government also replied that any form of intervention will be reciprocated. Yes, Iran probably cannot target U.S. mainland in itself, but we've seen that last year, after the escalation, the Iran-Israel war, that Iran actually tried to target the Al Udeid military base. So I think the U.S. is just trying to have a careful approach, but also kind of trying to push their own rhetoric and have an outcome that they want, whilst protecting their own troops close to Iran.
Mm-hmm. So the deployment of missile destroyers and a submarine suggests military readiness. Is it a deterrence or preparation?
Well, if we take into consideration what happened in Venezuela, there was also military deployment there for a few months before the whole operation with Maduro took place. So on the one hand, it could be a deterrence in the sense that they want to show to Iran that the U.S. is ready for anything. But it could also mean that the U.S. is trying to weigh in on the situation and see any openness that Iran has to kind of use this opportunity to have some sort of change in the regime in Iran, because I think it's, from the U.S. perspective, it's a golden opportunity for them, because it's something that's happening from within the country that just by, fanning the flames, they can probably get the results that they want.
Fuad, what role does Israel play in Iran's accusations that protests are being externally orchestrated?
Well, I think a lot of reports came out of Iran. We also saw that Iranian officials, they gathered together ambassadors within the country to show them that some of the protesters were using, machine guns and, weapons against the government forces. So I think Iran is trying to pin the blame on the protests on external actors and kind of rub away the responsibility of the initial protests against increasing economic situation and inflation rates.
So the European countries are urging citizens to leave Iran. Are we seeing early signs of coordinated Western contingency planning?
Yeah, I think in these kinds of situations, the Western countries, the European countries, they always try to have a backup plan, especially for their own citizens. We see that, a lot of them have put high alerts in their embassy websites because the situation is so unpredictable. They want to be ready for anything and to show that their citizens should actually get out of the country.
So far, what are the most important indicators you'll be watching in the coming days to judge whether this crisis escalates or stabilizes?
I think the very first thing that everyone has to look at is whether the protests continue or not. There have been reports within the country that the protests have been subsiding and that some of the initial peaceful protesters that went out to voice their concern over economic problems and high inflation rates actually started to go back to their homes when they saw that the protests were getting extremely violent. So I think the first thing we have to look for is if the protests will increase, and if it does increase, what kind of risk it poses to the internal stability of Iran, which could trigger some sort of action, a wider regional action by other countries.
Fuad Karamli, thank you very much for your insights and for helping us better understand the stakes and the risks surrounding Iran and the wider region. We appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You're up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for more.